Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are very pleased to share with you different stories about love and betrayal from around the world. Now let's begin our story journey today. The light in the abandoned garage was still on in the depths of the night. Elliot lifted his oil-covered hands, gazing at the half-restored 1967 Chevrolet Camaro engine before him. Today was his 7th wedding anniversary with Naomi, but she had sent a message 3 hours ago saying the company had an important client and she needed to work overtime. He sighed and refocused on his work. The precision and predictability of mechanics always brought him comfort, unlike his increasingly distant marriage. Elliot was the chief mechanic at the town's auto repair shop, with an almost obsessive passion for vintage cars. In this California suburb with its strong car culture, his unique expertise could breathe new life into antique cars on the verge of being scrapped. Whenever he restored a classic engine, his eyes would sparkle with a joy that others could hardly understand. Despite this, his income had always been modest, insufficient to meet his wife's growing material demands. Naomi, as an elite saleswoman at a rapidly growing local luxury real estate company, had seen her performance steadily increase over the past year, and her social circle had expanded. Initially, she loved Elliot's honesty and focus, but after 7 years of marriage, she began to see these qualities as obstacles to improving their quality of life. "Are you going to waste another entire night on that pile of junk?" said Naomi, standing at the garage door, holding shopping bags from an upscale store, with unmistakable disdain in her voice. She obviously hadn't worked overtime. Her perfect makeup and new dress proved that. "Client's car has to be delivered tomorrow," Elliot replied without raising his head, turning the wrench with precision. "Did you finish with your important client?" Naomi gave a slight snort. "It seems you don't even remember our wedding anniversary." She left without waiting for Elliot's response, her high heels marking a cold rhythm on the cement floor. Elliot put down his tools and leaned tiredly against the workbench. Of course he remembered the date. He had even hidden a small gift in a secret compartment of his toolbox, the bracelet that Naomi had always wanted. But lately, he increasingly doubted whether she would still appreciate such small gestures. 7 years ago, their meeting had been filled with romance. It was at a vintage car exhibition where Naomi, as the coordinator for the event company, was attracted by Elliot's enthusiasm and professional knowledge about vintage cars. Back then, she would bring him hot coffee when he worked late in the garage, listening patiently as he explained the history and function of each part. During the first few years after their wedding, they led a simple but satisfying life, not luxurious but cozy enough. The change began 2 years ago when Naomi joined her current real estate company and started dealing with wealthier clients. Her clothing, manner of speaking, even her values were silently changing. At first, Elliot was proud of his wife's career success, but gradually he noticed that her eyes no longer showed the admiration for his work they once had, replaced by disappointment in his lack of ambition. "You have such good skills, why don't you do something that makes more money?" Naomi would often say. "Like Desmond, if you opened a dealership, maybe we'd already be living in a big house by the lake." Desmond Pierce, always dressed in a suit and tie, driving the latest Mercedes model. Elliot didn't like this man. From a professional perspective, many cars in Desmond's dealership were in worse condition than they appeared, but customers were often deceived by his enthusiasm and extravagant promises. What bothered Elliot more was that Naomi seemed to especially favor this smooth-talking businessman, always mentioning his business acumen on various occasions. 3 months ago, on a Sunday, Elliot received an emergency repair call and missed a dinner Naomi had arranged with her colleagues. After that, her mood became even more distant. Elliot tried to reconcile, even promising to reduce his time in the garage, but Naomi seemed to have built an invisible wall. "Do you know what Desmond did yesterday? He sent the entire sales team to Palm Springs for a vacation. And you can't even arrange a decent date." Naomi's complaints became more direct, the comparisons more obvious. Elliot began to notice certain details: Naomi's late-night phone calls, the suddenly more frequent client meetings, and how she turned her body when looking at her phone. But he didn't want to believe the worst until that rainy night. That day, Naomi claimed she was going to the company for a quarterly meeting and would be back late. Concerned for her safety due to the heavy rain, Elliot drove to the company to pick her up. The building was completely dark and the security guard said there were no meetings that night. With his heart sinking, Elliot saw Naomi's car parked outside a luxury hotel on his way back. He stopped and waited in his car for 2 hours until he saw Naomi and Desmond come out together, embracing goodbye at the door. The following week, Elliot acted as usual but began gathering evidence. Naomi had changed her phone password, but her car keys were still in the same place. In her car, Elliot found a small jewelry box with a not very expensive but clearly romantic bracelet, with a card that read, "To my real estate queen, Desmond." Worse still, he found several restaurant receipts and hotel cards under the seat. These discoveries cut like knives into Elliot's heart, but he didn't confront Naomi immediately. He needed time to think, to plan his next step. In the midst of this agony, Naomi suddenly proposed divorce. "We're no longer compatible, Elliot," she said, sitting on the living room sofa with a decisive tone. "You can't give me the life I want." Elliot didn't object, only quietly asked, "You already have someone else?" Naomi's gaze faltered. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that we both should pursue the life we want." The divorce process was faster than Elliot had expected. Naomi hired an aggressive lawyer, demanding the sale of the house they shared and the division of assets. Surprisingly, the only thing Naomi didn't want was the old standalone garage, Elliot's workshop and refuge. "This is your entire worth," Naomi mocked as she signed the final documents. A garage full of junk. In the final stage of the divorce, Elliot discovered that Naomi was already living with Desmond. Evidently, their affair was no longer a secret. The townspeople began to give him looks of sympathy, but Elliot chose silence. He moved into the garage and began living alone. Though small, the garage had basic facilities and was certainly the place he knew best. The days after the divorce were not easy. The impact of losing his family plunged Elliot into depression for a time, but work and his passion for car restoration became his salvation. He worked at the repair shop during the day and returned to the garage at night to continue his vintage car restoration projects. A month later, on a weekend, Elliot decided to completely reorganize the space and turn it into a real home. While cleaning items stored for years in the back, he discovered something covered with a thick protective tarp. When he removed it, Elliot's breath almost stopped. It was an extremely damaged but still recognizable antique sports car. The car had been buried among piles of tools and parts, as if forgotten for decades. Elliot remembered that his grandfather often mentioned a special project when he was alive, but never gave details. Reviewing the documents and certificates accompanying the car, Elliot confirmed it was a 1956 Maserati A6 GCS, a rare racing car of which only 4 were manufactured worldwide. Elliot immediately immersed himself in research, discovering that although the car was old and severely damaged, its essential components were well preserved. It was a miracle, a priceless racing car forgotten in the corner of his dilapidated garage. He meticulously examined each piece and developed a detailed restoration plan. It would be an arduous task, requiring specialized knowledge, time, and money, but Elliot had never felt so excited and purposeful. When the news spread, Naomi's reaction was quicker and more intense than Elliot had anticipated. She suddenly appeared at the garage door, with a sweet smile he hadn't seen in a long time. "Elliot, I heard you found a valuable antique car," she said, leaning on the doorframe, with a deliberately relaxed posture. "Perhaps we could talk? After all, it's common property from our marriage." Elliot looked at her calmly. "The legal documents have already been signed, Naomi. The garage and everything in it is mine now." Naomi's expression instantly darkened. "You can't restore that level of car by yourself. That requires a professional team and a lot of money. Thanks for your concern, but this is my specialty," Elliot said politely but firmly as he escorted her out, knowing inside that this was just the beginning. In the following months, Elliot invested all his spare time and savings in restoring the Maserati. He worked during the day and spent evenings and weekends immersed in this challenging project. He researched extensively, consulted with professionals, and even traveled to Europe to obtain a specific part. During this time, Naomi and Desmond's life seemed prosperous. They moved into a lakeside mansion, and Naomi frequently posted photos of their luxurious life on social media: elegant restaurants, weekend yachts, designer clothes. Seeing this, Elliot simply turned off his phone and continued with his work. Naomi's boasting wasn't coincidental. She deliberately made these photos appear where Elliot might see them, hoping to provoke his jealousy or regret. However, Elliot's cold response irritated her. She began contacting him frequently with excuses, asking about irrelevant details, just to prove she could still influence his emotions. Desmond says that type of car, even restored, isn't worth much money. The market is very niche, Naomi said during a phone call. Are you really going to waste your time on that? Elliot only responded briefly, "Thank you for your concern," and hung up. In the 7th month of restoration, Elliot received a mysterious visitor. Lawrence Thornton was a retired tech company executive and a famous collector of antique cars. He had heard about the Maserati and came specially to visit. "I've heard of many people who tried to restore this model, but few could do it without destroying its authenticity." Lawrence carefully observed Elliot's work with admiration in his eyes. "Your technique and respect for detail is impressive." With Lawrence's encouragement and occasional guidance, Elliot's restoration work progressed faster. At the same time, through Lawrence, Elliot began to connect with more people in the vintage car circle, and his professional eye and technique quickly gained respect in this circle. Just then, unexpected news arrived. Desmond's dealership was facing multiple complaints, with customers claiming they had bought accident cars that were said to have no accident history. Elliot could have remained uninvolved, but when he discovered that one of the victims was an old teacher from town who had helped him during his student days, he decided to offer help. Elliot began to help these customers investigate the true history of their vehicles. With his professional knowledge, he soon discovered evidence that Desmond had falsified vehicle histories. Even more surprising, Elliot discovered through his contacts that Desmond had been using high-end client information obtained through Naomi to find targets and sell them problematic luxury cars. Did Naomi know about Desmond's fraud? There were indications that she knew at least part of it. Several affected customers confirmed that Naomi had directly recommended Desmond's dealership to them, guaranteeing special offers. When complaints began to increase, Naomi's attitude subtly changed. She reduced her boasting on social media and stopped contacting Elliot about the Maserati. When the Maserati's restoration was nearly complete, Lawrence invited Elliot to participate in the upcoming Monterey Concours d'Elegance. This is one of the most prestigious events in the field of antique cars, where collectors and professionals from around the world gather. "Bring your Maserati," Lawrence encouraged. "Let the world see true craftsmanship." After nearly a year of hard work, this car, once forgotten in a corner, now shone with breathtaking splendor. Every detail had been restored to the elegance of the original design, each piece repaired or recreated in the most respectful way to its authenticity. Just a week before the concours, the sounds of fighting between Naomi and Desmond echoed throughout the town. It turned out that, with increasing complaints, Desmond's dealership faced investigation, and multiple loans were urgently called in. Naomi discovered her name appeared on several guarantee documents, putting her credit and savings at serious risk. "You signed loans using my name?" Naomi shouted at Desmond in a public place. "That's a crime." Desmond simply replied coldly, "Don't pretend innocence, Naomi. You knew perfectly well the real situation of those cars. You just chose to ignore it." This dispute made Naomi's situation even more awkward. Not only did she face potential economic losses, but she could also be involved in legal troubles. In her anxiety, she thought again of Elliot and the potentially invaluable antique car. In Monterey, Elliot's Maserati became the center of attention at the event. Professional judges were amazed by the perfect condition of this rare racing car, and the media rushed to report on this miracle in the garage. Lawrence offered $6.3 million for the car, on the condition that Elliot would be the chief restoration expert for his collection. On the last day of the concours, a reporter from Car and Driver magazine was interviewing Elliot outside his garage. In front of the camera, while Elliot was explaining his restoration philosophy, urgent knocking on the door interrupted the recording. Naomi was at the door, looking very different from her previously elegant appearance. Her makeup was messy, and her eyes were full of panic and pleading. "Elliot, we need to talk." "Please," she shouted, completely ignoring the media around. "Desmond deceived me, and now the police are investigating him. All our assets are frozen." Elliot calmly walked to the door, but didn't open it. "Naomi, what happened is over. I hope you can look forward." as I have done. But we were husband and wife. You can't watch me with nothing." Naomi's voice was full of desperation. Elliot took a deep breath. "You made your decision when you left. Now, please respect my decision too." In front of reporters and cameras, Elliot gently closed the door, returning to his new life. Outside, Naomi's cries gradually faded away, while inside the garage, a new story was beginning. 3 days after the Monterey Concours d'Elegance, Elliot's life completely changed. The local television broadcast a special report about him, a master car restorer who created a miracle in a dilapidated garage. In the report, his Maserati sold for $6.3 million, setting an auction record for that year. Even more striking, the cameras captured the scene of Naomi outside the garage, and this unexpected dramatic moment made the story even more attractive. The media described this as garage revenge, how a mechanic underestimated by his wife managed to turn things around through his talent and perseverance. Although Elliot didn't completely agree with this description, he couldn't deny that seeing Naomi's astonished expression gave him a sense of balance. Not the pleasure of revenge, but confirmation of a twist of fate. Lawrence fulfilled his promise, hiring Elliot as the chief restoration advisor for his antique car collection, while encouraging him to establish his own high-end restoration studio. With his newly acquired reputation and funds, Elliot began transforming the humble garage into a professional studio. He didn't move away from this place loaded with so many memories, but chose to expand and upgrade it. A month later, Classic Rebirth Studio was officially established, specializing in the restoration and maintenance of rare antique cars. Meanwhile, Naomi and Desmond's situation worsened. The investigation revealed that Desmond systematically falsified vehicle histories, disguising severely damaged cars as perfect ones and selling them at high prices to uninformed buyers. Worse still, there was evidence that he had used Naomi's client relationship network to commit fraud and even forged her signature on some documents. "I just wanted a better life," Naomi said during police questioning, trying to appear innocent. "I didn't know what Desmond was doing was illegal." However, there was controversy about her level of knowledge. Several affected customers claimed that Naomi had directly recommended Desmond's dealership to them, guaranteeing special treatment. In fact, Naomi did know some circumstances, but chose to ignore them. In her relationship with Desmond, she was more concerned with what she could get: a luxurious lifestyle, a high-end social circle, and the opportunity to escape the life with Elliot that she considered without a future. As the investigation deepened, the day Desmond was arrested, Naomi was hosting a party at their mansion. The sudden appearance of police and media left all guests stunned. When Desmond was handcuffed and taken away, he didn't look at Naomi once, but she heard him tell the officer, "She knows much more than she admits." After that night, Naomi's social circle rapidly disintegrated. Friends stopped responding to her messages, and acquaintances pretended not to see her on the street. The real estate company terminated her contract, citing a moral clause, and former high-end clients distanced themselves from her. Elliot could have remained uninvolved in this storm, but when the police contacted him to assist in the investigation, he chose to provide help. He analyzed in detail several problematic cars purchased from Desmond's dealership, proving these vehicles had suffered serious accidents and been professionally covered up. His testimony became important evidence for the prosecution, but he refused to comment on the case in the media, especially the part related to Naomi. "I'm just doing my professional job," he told inquiring reporters. About the past, "I have nothing to add." When autumn arrived, Elliot's studio already had a stable clientele. He hired 2 young apprentices and began passing on his skills. Interestingly, one of the young men was the grandson of the affected old teacher. Whenever Elliot saw this young man learning enthusiastically, he felt a special satisfaction. Life sometimes forms circles in wonderful ways. One Saturday morning, Elliot was in his studio conducting a preliminary assessment of a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, a jewel sent by a European collector. Suddenly, someone violently knocked on the studio door. Naomi was at the door, more haggard than months ago. She wore no makeup, dressed in regular jeans and a t-shirt, looking as if she had just gotten out of bed. "I need to talk to you, Elliot." Her voice was hoarse. "Please, just a few minutes." Elliot hesitated a moment, then shook his head. "Naomi, we have nothing to talk about. Please leave." You don't understand? I'm really desperate. Naomi's voice became sharp. They've frozen all assets. I can't even pay the rent. That's the result of your own choices. Elliot remained calm. I suggest you consult with a lawyer. Naomi's look flashed with anger. So this is your attitude? Watching the person you once loved in trouble and simply ignoring her. Love is based on respect and honesty, Naomi. Elliot looked directly into her eyes. When you betray that, love ceases to exist. Naomi suddenly laughed, but her smile was full of bitterness. You know what, Elliot? Now you've succeeded. Suddenly you've become so cold. When I left with Desmond, at least part of the reason was that you never cared about my feelings. You were always absorbed in your vintage car world. Elliot felt a surge of anger, but contained it. If that's your explanation, I have nothing more to say. Please leave, Naomi, and don't come back. Naomi bit her lip. I did something wrong. I admit it. But Desmond deceived me. I'm a victim too. You're not a victim, Naomi. You're an accomplice, Elliot said coldly. You chose betrayal and deception, and now you must face the consequences. Just as I had to face the consequences of your betrayal. Naomi wanted to say something more, but Elliot had already closed the door. He stood in the center of the studio, feeling a stabbing pain in his chest. Although more than a year had passed, the scars of betrayal were still deep. But he knew he had made the right decision. There are betrayals that can never be forgiven. Meanwhile, Desmond's trial was underway. The evidence was overwhelming. He faced multiple charges of fraud and document forgery. The prosecution revealed how he had systematically deceived, buying severely damaged cars, hiring professionals to hide the damage, falsifying vehicle histories, and selling them at high prices to uninformed buyers. More shocking still, the investigation showed that Desmond had been repeating this pattern for a long time, using his relationship with Naomi to access high-end client resources. There was evidence that Naomi received referral fees, although in court she insisted she was unaware of the vehicle's true condition. Desmond became increasingly desperate. During the trial, he tried to shift more responsibility to Naomi, claiming she was a fully informed partner. Naomi desperately tried to dissociate herself, but evidence showed she had at least consented to Desmond's behavior. Their relationship rapidly deteriorated, accusing each other, going from lovers to enemies. I loved her. That's why I gave her everything she wanted, Desmond said in court, his voice full of resentment. And now she pretends she knew nothing. Naomi countered. He controlled everything. I just did what he told me. I didn't know the cars had problems. This spectacle of mutual accusations continued for weeks in the media, further damaging both their images. Finally, Desmond was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay substantial compensation to the victims. His dealer's license was permanently revoked, and his once shining dealership closed for good. Naomi, although avoiding criminal charges, saw her reputation and professional career irreparably damaged as a key witness. Throughout the storm, Elliot maintained a low profile. He rejected multiple requests for exclusive interviews from the media, focusing on developing his own business. Ironically, Desmond's downfall indirectly helped Elliot's studio. Several high-end clients previously deceived by Desmond now sought Elliot's professional advice, and his honest attitude and sophisticated technique won their trust. With the arrival of winter, Elliot received an unexpected call. It was Lawrence, who proposed a bold idea: collaborate to open a high-end company dedicated to the restoration and sale of rare antique cars. I have the capital and connections. You have the technique and judgment, Lawrence said on the phone. We can change the landscape of the entire industry. This proposal made Elliot reflect deeply. The changes of the past year had already exceeded his expectations, but this new opportunity meant greater responsibility and possibility. He finally accepted, on the condition that the workshop would remain in its original location, that garage once ridiculed as worthless. Some roots should not be cut, he explained to Lawrence. This place reminds me of all my beginnings. In spring, Classic Rebirth Restoration and Collection was officially established, and Elliot became a respected figure in the industry. His story was reported by more media, including the cover of a national trade magazine. With the development of his business, Elliot began receiving restoration requests from all over the country, including rare models of incalculable value. He expanded his studio, hired more staff, but still personally participated in each important project. For him, restoring antique cars wasn't just a job, but respect for history and craftsmanship. Naomi's life took an opposite turn. After losing her job and social circle, she tried various ways to start anew, but her name was already closely linked to Desmond's fraud case. After several rejected job interviews, she had to accept poorly paid jobs to survive. What Naomi found hardest to accept was the complete collapse of her social circle. Former friends moved away, stopped inviting her to any events. She tried to reintegrate, but always encountered cold looks and whispers. Several times she ran into Elliot in public places. He was polite but distant, which made her feel even more pain. Naomi began drinking to escape reality. She tried to contact Elliot many times, sometimes with midnight phone calls when she was drunk, sometimes with long messages ranging from remorse to guilt to reproach. Elliot never responded, simply adding her number to the blacklist. For Naomi, the hardest thing to accept wasn't the loss of wealth or status, but Elliot's success and tranquility. Deep in her heart, she always believed she was the one who deserved a better life. Seeing her ex-husband, whom she once despised, now with fame and fortune, while she had nothing, was a contrast she couldn't overcome. Why does he deserve all this? Drunk Naomi complained to an unknown bartender in a bar. I'm the one with vision and social skills. The bartender simply cleaned glasses coldly. Maybe because he didn't betray anyone. These words hurt Naomi, but she refused to admit her mistakes. In her narrative, she was just an innocent victim deceived by Desmond, a victim of circumstances. However, in the silent hours of night, when the numbness of alcohol gradually faded, the truth briefly emerged. She chose betrayal. What she desired was luxury without effort, not achievements earned through honest work. Desmond spent a difficult first year in prison. His once glamorous lifestyle was replaced by strict prison rules, and his arrogance and control were useless here. Worse still, he had lost everything: career, wealth, freedom, even Naomi. At first, Desmond received weekly letters or visits from Naomi, but over time, these contacts became less frequent until they completely disappeared. When he learned that Naomi referred to herself on social media as a deceived victim, Desmond felt a surge of anger and betrayal. He wrote a long letter detailing how Naomi actively participated in the fraud scheme, how she enjoyed the luxury items purchased with that money, but finally tore it up. He realized that no matter what he said, it wouldn't change the current situation. In prison, Desmond had plenty of time to reflect. He began to understand how his actions had harmed others, including clients who trusted him, Naomi whom he used, and even himself. However, instead of sincere repentance, Desmond regretted more having been caught. If he had the chance to start over, he would probably be more careful rather than completely changing his behavior. 2 years later, Elliot's business was flourishing. Classic Rebirth had become the elite brand in the field of antique car restoration, with clients including world-renowned collectors and museums. In an interview for a specialist magazine, when asked the secret of his success, Elliot's answer was simple but powerful. Focus on what you truly love, he said. Don't let others' expectations or social standards define your worth. This phrase spread widely among vintage car enthusiasts, but for Naomi, who saw the interview by chance, it was like a slap. She had been precisely the one who tried to define Elliot's worth by her own standards, and now she was paying a terrible price. That same night, Naomi appeared again at the door of Elliot's studio. This time, she looked more haggard than the last time, but the desperation in her eyes had been replaced by calm. One last time, Elliot, she said through the door. I need to talk to you. Elliot saw her through the monitor, hesitated a moment, then pressed the intercom. Naomi, we have nothing to talk about. I'm moving to the East Coast, Naomi continued, her voice surprisingly calm. Before I leave, there are some things I want to tell you. Elliot sighed and finally opened the door, but just stood in the doorway, not inviting her in. Naomi looked him straight in the eyes. I didn't come to apologize, because I know that no matter what I say, I can't change what has already happened. I just want you to know that I finally understand the problem between us. Elliot remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The problem wasn't your job or income, said Naomi, her eyes shining with complex emotions. The problem was that I never really understood your love for those vintage cars. I always saw them as junk, while you saw history and art. I pursued superficial glamour, while you pursued inner value. Elliot relaxed a bit, but remained alert. And nothing. Naomi shook her head. I'm not here to rebuild anything. That's no longer possible. I just wanted to tell you before I leave that I finally understand what I lost. Not your success or wealth, but a person who truly loves his work and is willing to fight for it. Elliot was silent for a moment, then nodded. Thank you for your honesty, Naomi. I hope you find a new beginning on the East Coast. Naomi smiled slightly, but her smile was full of bitterness. You won't forgive me, will you? Not even now. Some things, once done, cannot be undone, Elliot said quietly. I don't hate you, Naomi, but I won't forget everything that happened either. Naomi nodded, as if already expecting this answer. All right, let's leave it at that. Good luck, Elliot. She turned and left, this time without tears, without pleading, just with a calmness of finally accepting reality. Elliot watched her disappear into the darkness and closed the door. He returned to the studio, looking at the 1938 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic he was restoring. This car was worth more than $40 million, one of only 4 existing in the world. Its restoration required extreme patience and precision. Every detail had to be perfect. This was exactly what Elliot loved, recreating history, reconnecting broken beauty. In a way, this was similar to his own life. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but he had found a way to move forward, building a new life. Not restoring the past, but creating a new future. 3 months later, Elliot received a letter from New York. Inside was a newspaper clipping about Desmond's early release. The article mentioned that Desmond had received a reduced sentence for good behavior and health issues, but had lost all his properties and would face long-term debts. There was no text in the letter, just Naomi's signature. Elliot threw the clipping in the trash without giving it further thought. The next day, local news reported a strange incident. The first thing Desmond did after leaving prison was to look for Naomi, only to discover she had gone and her apartment had been rented to someone else. Nobody knew exactly where she had gone, only that it was somewhere on the East Coast. Desmond, in a brief interview, appeared haggard and confused, unable to accept the fact that Naomi had really left him. She owes me an explanation, Desmond told reporters, with determination in his eyes. We were supposed to face this together. When asked if he regretted his fraud, Desmond simply shrugged. Business is like that. There are risks and rewards. I just had bad luck. This interview spread quickly online, and people felt shocked and outraged by Desmond's attitude. His excuses not only failed to win sympathy, but generated more attention toward the victims. Days later, Desmond was forced to close all his social media accounts, disappearing from public view. Elliot remained uninvolved in all of this. He concentrated on his work, enjoying the current tranquility. He no longer sought revenge or proof, because life had already given the best answer. True value won't be underestimated, and betrayal eventually turns against itself. When winter came again, Elliot's studio received a special client, a young man with the remains of an almost unrecognizable antique car. This young man was the son of one of Desmond's victims, who had used the compensation received to buy this old car, hoping Elliot could help restore it. Why did you choose this car? Elliot asked curiously. The restoration cost might exceed its value. The young man smiled. Because my father taught me that true value isn't on the surface, but in how much heart you're willing to invest. This car has special meaning for me, just like your Maserati had for you. Elliot looked at this young man and saw a reflection of his former self, that pure and persistent love for vintage cars. He nodded, accepting the project. And on the distant East Coast, Naomi walked alone through the streets of New York, passing by the window of a luxury dealership, where a classic Ferrari restored by Elliot was displayed. Next to the window was Car and Driver magazine, with Elliot's photo on the cover. She stopped, looked for a long time, and then continued walking under the snow, blending into the hurried crowd. That ruined garage, once ridiculed as worthless, has now become a world-renowned restoration center. And Elliot, that mechanic considered without ambition, has written with his professionalism and perseverance a legend about betrayal, loyalty, and final victory. If this story has resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. We hope to see you again in our next story.